I really thank Mr. Raghavan, who is the speaker of the day, taking time to join us and share his experience and how he started his company and his journey from AC Tech till now. Mr. Raghavan is the founding director at New Concept Information System Private Limited, and he completed chemical engineering from AC Tech in 1976 and postgraduate in management from McMaster University, Canada. And he has more than 30 years of experience in the IT and social development domains. His expertise are project MIS, knowledge management, policy and analytical documentation, sectors like education, public health, and governance. He's also the author of unique historical fiction happening, 2,300 years ago. That means before Tirulur time, you're writing a history. Huh? Okay, so he also edits an online magazine and has recently published a historical fiction. Welcome, Mr. Raghavan, sir. We are really privileged to have you as part of the AC Tech Entrepreneurship Club, which is the unique initiative by the alumni, for the alumni, to help the alumni entrepreneurs to grow them and inspire the students and faculty to be part of the entrepreneurship events.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ramesh.
Yeah, please get it started. Thank you.
Okay, shall I start?
Yeah, please.
Okay, let me, maybe I'll take about 20-25 minutes. I don't have a presentation. I'll just go through my experience in entrepreneurship. And so that will leave about half an hour's time for question and answers or discussion, whichever way it goes. So let me start. As Ramesh introduced, I'm from the 76 batch. I went to do my MBA, came back immediately. I didn't stay beyond that. And I worked in, I did my MBA in operations research. So that was sort of a big break from chemical engineering. And after that, I had very little to do with engineering. So quite something to do with information technology and some engineering to do with that. So I came back, joined Tata Consultancy Services. I was there for about 3 years. These are the days of the old days when there were just 2 offices, one in Air India and then in Nirman Bhavan in near Churchgate. Okay, so after that, I had a short stint at Keltron and then started, I tried my hand at being a freelance IT developer. And after that, in 1989, some of my friends whom I knew for quite some time, we decided that why not we start an enterprise? And they were in Delhi. I was working in between Chennai and Bangalore. So I shifted to Delhi. We just took up the thing and then started this new concept. Initially, it was a private limited partnership. And after a while, we felt the necessity to register it as a private limited company. So 4 of us started, 4 directors, 2 men and 2 women. And one of them was quite old, a retired IAS officer. So we started with the idea, and it was a very different enterprise. So the reason was that the idea was to limit or focus on the social development area and not so much on the corporate side. So it is basically a consultancy service. We provide consultancy on all aspects of social development. Social development meaning there are some specific sectors like education, health, environment, women's development, generally capacity building of people. So it is our ultimate client is the government, the central government, the state governments. But we directly don't have any contracts with the government as it is, though the government finally approves or the services that we provide go to the government. It is through various agencies that play a middle role, like the UN system. We work a lot with UNICEF and organizations like UNFPA, UNDP, and so on. We have worked with World Bank. We worked with the British funding agency called DFID. So these are the organizations who provide some kind of soft services to the government. Normally, they don't do much in infrastructure. They don't provide infrastructural support to the government. It's more on the soft side, like building capacities, providing them with solutions, evaluating their projects, and so on. So basically what we do is that we develop some solutions for bringing efficiency in government projects. We communicate a lot with the end user of government projects, and we evaluate the projects, whether they are going in the right way. So evaluation would mean quite stringent setting up baselines, doing a midline evaluation, and finally checking at the end line whether things have been accomplished. And as you all know, nothing great can be expected from government programs. There will be targets, and they will constantly keep missing those targets. But then this evaluation component and the consultancy that is provided tries to sort of, within the given limitations, try to improve program performance. Because if you look at government programs, like whether it's the health or education, it is largely directed at the marginalized sections, either the slum population or the rural population. Many things happen in between, and there is a need for better monitoring, better planning of those projects. So that is what we strive to do that. And it's been fairly successful, because I worked a lot in the polio program, and there's another program called the Kala Azar program. It is prevalent only in the northern states, not in Tamil Nadu, but in Tamil Nadu and Kerala, there is a filariasis program, which is specific to some of the southern states. So these are the health programs which try to reach the population, the last mile connectivity that we think about. So this is briefly what we do. We decided to be a private limited company and not an NGO, because NGOs are stuck to some kind of funding arrangement. They are stuck to funders, the funders' perception of what should happen. So we thought a lot about it. An NGO, being an NGO meant certain advantages, like you can attract funds, and once you get a 5-year funding, then you don't need to worry about, year to year, you can have a steady state, what Senthil talked about, a steady state performance for 5 years. Now, but we decided not to go for it. We are a private limited agency, which means that we'll have to bid against projects every time. And the project ends, then again, we have to get some new projects. So that has been a big challenge. The project stream is not very uniform, and the project requirements are, tremendous variation between the projects. In fact, over the years, we have found a lot of change, a lot of challenges in the kind of sectors that we have to be. Like, things come, there is a disease that is suddenly given importance, like AIDS, for example, and then there is tuberculosis or malaria. And in education, there was a lot of, in the 90s, the priority was to bring children to at least let them complete the primary level. From the start of 2000, it became children should complete at least the elementary level. And now it is to do with retaining girls, particularly up to high school. So that is a current priority. So priorities change, therefore your end user, the perception, the messages that you give, everything changes. So it has been a roller coaster ride, but a very interesting kind of ride. Every time you learn something new, you adapt yourself. The requirements are you have to stay on your feet. You have to be very nimble and try to find out what is happening in the world. Everything depends on the government's priorities in specific sectors. So that is, we were quite happy after that. But one thing that we realized was that these 4 directors, normally as an entrepreneur, it is best, one would be very happy if they are alone, if they can take all the decisions. But when you have 3 other guys and women to reckon with, then it is always decision making becomes a bit slower. But we have learned how to deal with each other. We 4 are totally different people, but we have stuck to from 1989, 30 years now, more than 30 years. So we have had a smooth kind of, all these 30 years we have been together. And that is one thing which is really appreciated in our sector. In the social development sector, I would say that new concept information systems is pretty well known. If you come to the central level, the government, the UN agencies would be aware of us, and we are very happy we have come to that stage. And that happened because we had that kind of unity between us, the kind of understanding what each other stood for. So all this time we have had that is one very important thing that in entrepreneurship, I would say, more than the financial side, building relations with your partners, trusting them, and going together, listening to them, and taking collective decision has been a very, very important asset for us. And understanding the end user has been, again, a very important issue, because our end users are the most, they're illiterate, they are or semi-literate, they live in difficult conditions. So if you go and tell them you have to take care of your health in a better way, then they'll ask us that, you tell us what is that way, because they struggle for their day-to-day living. So you'll have to understand from where they stand and try to offer solutions. So in terms of information technology, I had tried, each one of us, our partners have tried to pull the organization in one direction. So in my own way, I had tried to pull the organization into offering some low-cost solutions to rural communication or implementing projects in the rural areas, because now with increased mobile usage, there is a great potential to reach the audience at the last mile, and to train people who reach them. So these are the people are at the district and the block level. So now training, and particularly after COVID, the mobile usage has become very important, and trainings are done through Zoom. But at the same time, you'll have to understand that the trainee on the other side needs to understand what you're saying. So we try to do a lot of animation, we try to do training aids and so on. So that has demanded a lot from technology. Like, how do you develop some low-cost solutions? We ourselves are not technological developers, but we have tried to find people to collaborate with us to develop mobile apps and all that, which can suddenly work offline, online, and then sync when you get the thing. If you have visited many villages where to get the mobile going, they have to go to that nearest small hill and try to get the signal from there. So understanding all these things, we have tried to provide solutions, both training solutions as well as other kinds of things. There are a lot of other areas where we are not entered, like, for example, producing purified water at a low cost, or other aspects of social development that really what is there. And some of our clients have tried to install kiosks there, interactive kiosks at the village level, so people can touch and interactively as well as intuitively try to get answers for what they want, or try to sort of send an application form for an Aadhaar card, for a ration card, just by touching some buttons. So these are all some innovations that India itself is going through, because how do you bring technology? You know, technology is now staying at the top levels in Bangalore and Chennai, and there is a lot of usage of technology by the corporates. But if you go down, then technology just reduces to simple mobiles, you know, the normal ones, not even the smartphones. So how do you then bring the technology to the rural poor has been one consideration. Apart from various other things, like we do documentation and some best practices and so on. So now, in terms of the way that we have run the enterprise, is now 30 years, and we started as just 4 people with, then we didn't have a place. Our capital was literally zero. We invested 3,000 rupees per head to start the enterprise, that's all. And we didn't have any help. We did everything. Initially, we worked from one of the houses of the partners, and her dad gifted us our first PC. So 1990, imagine that we got our first PC, and we started experimenting with it and trying to do that. At the time, we wanted to do a lot of communication and develop some kind of layout software and fonts. So I had some programming experience, so started developing some fonts. And I remember that I did some programming in PostScript, and we didn't have a printer. We had a computer. We need a laser printer for that, and the laser printers had just come into the market. So I sent a guy with the program on a CD. He went and tried to take a printout from a guy who was charging for laser prints, and the laser printer just conked. And so he yelled at us, and what did you bring in this CD? You know, it is not a printable file. It is some program which, you know, gave instructions to the laser printer and made it go bonkers. So these were some experiences of trying to see how technology can be developed and sort of shaped to be used in a low resource setting. Okay. So this has been constantly our endeavor. Now, one thing that we decided is that we as directors, we are also owner directors, that we decided right in the beginning that we are in the social development field, and therefore certain principles have to be there. Like, we are not an NGO, but we have to sort of behave like an NGO. We have to take on projects with an ethical approach. You know, projects which are not really trying to sell something to the rural audience. So we generally avoid taking product marketing or product consultancy. We don't touch anything, even though they may say that it is meant for the poor, or it is meant to improve that standard of living. So we don't do that. That is why we stick to our client. Our clientele is very limited kind of thing. It is only the UN system and very well tested and approved international NGOs who work here and who have been approved by the government also. Normally, we make sure that all the projects that we take up are indirectly connected to ultimately the government program, and it is not some parallel thing which somebody is trying to install a parallel school system or a parallel health system. It is to do with the government infrastructure. So these are some principles, and I can very happily say that all these years we haven't even defaulted even 1 month in payment of our salaries. Even during COVID time, we kept the staff, and in spite of the fact that it has been increasingly a problem to find good human resources and keep them together, and it is, you know, the projects go up and down. So we have to balance between regular staff and the other consultants who work for us. There are a lot of consultants who work with us on a retainer basis because it is their choice. They want to give 5 days in a month, 10 days in a month. So they work with us in that way. So the providing salaries and keeping the human resources happy and together and motivated and constantly capacitated has been an important priority area for us. So we organize in-house trainings and in-house sharing of our experiences. If once Infosys Murthy said that our organization, the biggest asset is the human resources, and our assets walk out every night and then come back in the morning. So because computers are really for him not assets, it is the human beings. And I would say that it is the same with our enterprise. They walk out in the night, come back in the morning, and we have to make sure that they are back because it is very human intensive, much more than programming. Okay, programming needs programmers and everything needs a human interface. But in this particular area, social development, human beings are very, very important. Human beings who empathize with what they are doing, with the ultimate goal of the project, with the ultimate user in mind. And you have to really go through things. See, because compared to a normal city-based job, our people have to go to the countryside, have to go to the most difficult, unreachable villages and try to find out what is happening. It has always been a challenge to retain people. Young people come, they work for us for 2 years, learn a lot of things, okay, and then they want to go to a CSR project. CSRs have now come a great way, corporate social responsibility foundations. So that again, we went through a lot of ups and downs. Initially, when we were in the 90s, there were a lot of smaller countries who had set up a base in India, and they were all providing support in various areas. Like somebody was focusing on TB, somebody was focusing on leprosy, and somebody else on education, and so on. So in the 90s and the mid 90s, and particularly at the beginning of the millennium, the Indian government took the decision that we don't want to have so many players in this field. So all these smaller countries who are giving funds were asked to shut shop. They can, of course, fund international NGOs who can work in India, but they cannot directly fund projects here. So ultimately, what was left was this big funding agencies, American funding agency, USAID, and the British, and the World Bank, and the Japanese. So these were the big funding agencies, but they sort of fund consortiums, which are led by global corporates like Mott MacDonald and KPMG and so on. So a lot of change took place, and then we found ourselves competing with KPMG and Pricewaterhouse for projects, and that was a very difficult thing because they tried to enter the market by just they offering literally free services for the first 1 or 2 projects. So that is how they captured many things in the government. They set up state resource agencies. So we had difficulty with respect to these things. So anyway, I feel that it has been a lot of learning, and like any consultancy organization, we are cut across domains. We keep learning every year. Every year something happens. Like, for example, COVID, we had to learn everything about COVID to communicate on COVID. And now with immunization starting, we have to learn everything about immunization to communicate to the rural audience that, that this is possible or what will happen to you. So every time you have to be on your feet, you have to be a multi-domain, build that multi-domain expertise and willing to take up jobs in any corner of India. We have literally done projects in every state of India, and a few outside India also, but mostly in India. So this is briefly, I think, taken about half an hour. So maybe we can open up, some questions, and that may make it more interesting. If I keep talking, I'm not sure whether it is going to remain interesting.
Yeah, good. So if anyone have got a questions, they can unmute and then talk over the phone. So I have a question. One is that why it that you wanted to go to social entrepreneurship, rather than commercial, fully commercial, on the other hand, your classmates are like, kind of extremely doing commercial type of business. On the other hand, you are motivated on those times to do this.
Yeah, I have been, it is to do with my belief in social development. I have been a social development activist, and side by side with all this entrepreneurship, I have worked in various magazines to take up social causes. Like in 1990s, along with setting up this new concept, we ourselves, because we are like-minded in that way. One of the founders is a retired IAS officer who was retired as an additional secretary from the Labor Department. So he had done a lot of labor research and was a vocal um, um, speaker for labor rights. Okay. So we took up certain issues. We started an in-house magazine, and that is how my editing and other things started. I mean, I have been wanting to write and become an author. But I have edited magazines on the way. And in 1990s, we started a magazine called The Review of Contemporary Affairs. It was run by New Concept itself as a part of the general learning from the experiences that we have. But it sort of went a bit away from the experiences also. Like, for example, in the 1990s, the whole trade agreement, the global trade agreement, went through a lot of change. From the earlier, what was called GATT, the GATT agreement, there was a transition plan was made towards WTO, and that would have affected a lot of industries and small scale enterprises and all that. So we just took up some issues like that. Again, with the health infrastructure, where do you need to spend, and on budget allocations and all that. So uh, social development has always been an interest area for me. Therefore, I try to um, use my professional expertise in social development, including programming and all. We now develop MIS systems for large projects. We develop digitizing programs, like all the backend operations. We try to develop software, and we work on websites, interactive websites, digital repositories, and also these mobile apps. Mobile apps which can be integrated with a database behind, so that it updates, like the particular aspect, whether a program reached a particular household. We develop mobile applications to monitor those things. So these are some. I mean, I try to play with both. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Raghavan, sir.
Yeah.
I have got a question. You are mentioning about social, this one, AIDS.
It's very feeble. Maybe you should get closer to the mic.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned about AIDS in this program, health program. I remember somebody has contributed about $35 million for AIDS prevention. It started with that, and a lot of NGOs started propagating the sex education in the schools and all. The AIDS mainly because of some characterlessness, some sort of a characterlessness from somebody. Has anybody taken steps to improve the character of the persons, character development? Has any government initiated the steps or spent some money on propagating this? I found whole $35 million were spent on something which we don't want to, I don't want to tell where it is spent. So the people like us professionals, have you ever suggested to the government to spend on character development of the individuals, so which can improve the overall health of the country?
Yeah. See,
yes, sir.
This $35 million is peanuts in AIDS, because billions of dollars have been spent in AIDS control because it just sprung up like an epidemic, so nothing could be done, and there was no time to think about what next. Like, so immediate solutions were offered, and immediate education of why it is happening, and isolating the AIDS patients and all that. Now I don't know about the moralistic aspect of it, because we cannot keep telling a population to behave in a particular way. It is, you have to bring, it is a social consciousness that brings that, and it has to happen. There is I have a lot of faith and a lot of belief in the Indian civilization. We have a 5,000-year-old history, but at the same time, I would not be moralistic. I would never say that if you look at the Ajanta and the Ellora and the other things, I would not say that you'll have to educate your children not to know anything about sex or not even think about anything. So it is a civilizational problem, which I cannot comment much on that. But when it is to do with AIDS control or attending to the epidemic as it is, like it is happening in COVID. See, normally what happens is that where we focus on is the most marginalized. If you look at AIDS, you can get treatment, those who can afford can go to the big private hospitals and get some treatment and afford those, everyday tablets. But the poor cannot, for whatever reason. They may have contracted it. Like, for example, AIDS is contracted by women who of migrant men a lot. You notice that in pockets where migration happens, the men migrate to the cities and then come back with AIDS and affect the women also. And women are innocent victims of AIDS. So now we'll have to focus on them. We'll have to bring that AIDS management and how to control, and that stigma that is there in society, we'll have to remove that. And that is where we concentrate. Unlike other diseases like a TB or malaria, here there's a lot of stigma involved, and that really destroys lives, destroys people, destroys women, destroys children. Like, children whose parents are affected with AIDS are not allowed to enter schools. So these are some aspects that we have concentrated on and tried to see that government should play a positive role in that and destigmatize the populations, that thing. So a lot of work has been done. We have done, years and years of work on that, trying to explain that the victim is not to be punished. They're already suffering from AIDS, and you cannot keep telling them what to do. So that has been one aspect of AIDS.
Sir, one thing, this funding, they say, is it is a soft loans? I heard that it is a soft loans which is to be repaid by the government. And the fund, is it so, sir? Is it so?
No, that was long back. Now World Bank aid has reduced a lot. At one time, India was very dependent on soft loans and World Bank, and not only soft loans.
Control and all, AIDS control and other aspects.
Now health budgets are basically heavily financed by the government only, and with a little bit borrowing from the public market. There's a big fiscal deficit. Now that I don't want to go into that, but that fiscal deficit is not soft loan. It is, they borrow it from various others. There is also some internal savings. So it is not to do with funding now. India is not so dependent on foreign funding now, particularly in social development. Sendil, you had some.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to congratulate you and your friends for choosing this path. Right, like it's like you said, the first time when you mentioned about what you guys do, I looked at it as shouldn't this be an NGO? And then you answered that you already, like, you guys discussed and made a decision. And in Houston, Texas, I was involved in part of like a nonprofit organization, and there's a lot of benefits and a lot of challenges. And one of the things I always tell my board of directors will be like, it would have been easy if it's a limited company, right? Like we could make those decisions. So definitely congratulations, because you had an opportunity to go after just like a pure business after money, but then this is like more social cause awareness, helping people from the rural areas and things like that. So hats off for that decision. But with respect to entrepreneurship, which is kind of one of the reasons we are all meeting here, I have a bunch of questions. And one of them is related to working with government agencies. You see all these red tapes. I mean, some of them I've read. Most of them are what we see in Shankar movies and other movies, right? Like you you have to jump through 20,000 steps before you can actually make anything good happen to the people, right? How do you deal with that? How do you guys deal with all this? How much of it is true? You don't. I know we are recording, so you don't have to get to the details. But is it real? And how hard is it? How do you guys keep moving forward? Right. That's a challenge out of your hand, and you still need to keep fighting it to reach the people. Right. How do you do that?
Yeah, I'm not going to mention names, but we had a lot of difficulty in that because the government is the ultimate the client. So often they have a decision in who is given this project. Okay, so what happens is that the procurement agency in the government has a lot of rules and regulations. We have come across very honest IAS officers who are very motivated and dedicated. They want some things to happen. And initially, we sort of took their word, were sufficiently impressed by their dedication. So they said, you do this for me, and somehow I will get my procurement to give you a contract. And we even did the project. But then when they went to the procurement, they hit a wall. They could not overcome the procurement, ask them all kinds of questions. How does this guy do it? Did you first inform us? Did you get 3 quotes, 5 quotes? Did you advertise in the newspaper and so on? So we decided after that, we had 1 or 2 very bad experiences with the government procurement agency. And not only the government has autonomous agencies, and their procurement is also as corrupt and as bureaucratic. So we decided that we are not going to take direct contracts from government. We will only take through other intermediaries who are actually giving the fund to the government. So the government cannot complain. They cannot say that, why did you choose this agency? So that is the reason why we go through the UN system bidding process. We are empaneled there, and any UN system in India and abroad, certain kinds of certain key thematic areas, we get the request for proposals, and then we bid. And on the basis of a global bid or a national bid or a state level bid, we get projects. So that produces a lot of uncertainty in our work, but then we cannot help it. That is one way that we have to reckon with it. And also what happens is that these bids always have a time period. They are never very long projects because of the very nature that, you cannot give something to an agency for many years. So there's always a cutoff. 3 years is a max. Most projects get done in 6 months to 1 year. So therefore, we are never sure about what we are going to get next year. Our order book will always be, we can only predict another 6 months, not beyond that. So we had to be very careful. When investing in anything, because it is human resource, we are able to manage. And we as directors are also, another issue is that we are agreed to become salaried directors. We don't take dividends from the company. In that way, we treat it like a non-profit, and we put back we keep a buffer in the profit so that when there are ups and downs in this project cycle, then we can continue to pay salaries, and also some minimum infrastructure we can invest, like a computer or a table for everyone. So now we have about totally 60 to 70 staff we have, and our head office is in Delhi, and 2 or 3 branches we have, one in Chennai, one in Hyderabad, and one in Lucknow. So, and we have a set of people who give us consultancy on a retainer basis. So many days they work, and 5 days, 10 days, and so on. And when we take up field work, then we hire people only for the project. There are many researchers in the districts. If you see, basically they are floating population. They take up projects with us, then tomorrow they will go to some other project and do a research. They're all basically data collectors and data analyzers. So we rely on them. We have a roster of things. So we try to keep our overheads low. We try to keep our infrastructural investment low. We don't manufacture any products. So that is how, but we never we don't go near the government procurement. It is highly corrupt, you can say. Very difficult. Very rarely we have found government people or autonomous organizations selecting us on a bid basis without any, right in the beginning, we have to tell them that, we will go by the contract, by the deliverables. So it has been a difficult thing. In fact, in one case, we because we did not really please somebody in the government, our contract got our invoice. A fine was levied on the invoice about 10 lakhs. So we could not go to a higher agency because then you will take up the entire government. We could not go do anything about it.
Wow. That's awesome information.
But
and also
very
you can
interesting.
see the challenges that you all had to face and come through. Second question I have is with respect to how you all make decisions. I know Rajni and I, we both we went to the same batch, and then we've also been partners in a couple of companies, and now we are trying to form one. We are like 4 of us trying to make decisions. We haven't yet formed anything, but we still haven't been able to come to some decision, right? Like it's been like 6 months of talking about what we need to do and how and things like that. How do you guys make those calls? Because those 4, and then do you also have some kind of an agreement or something that you fall back, or maybe like the 10 commandments, if you will, that every time you are not able to make a decision, hey, let's go back and refer to this? Or how do you guys do that?
Yeah, we take decisions together, and even if one of us doesn't agree, then we generally don't pursue that. We leave it there, and we take some time over that. So there have been ideas that we should take on this, or we should go to that area, that particular area, or this particular area. We have always tried to debate over that, take it as it comes. There are certain ethical issues in this area. There are, for example, there are some agencies who come in, like we faced a lot of ethical, where do you do that? There are some like family planning kind of thing where people come with solutions, of what you call injections for women, which have a very deleterious effect. Throughout the world, it has been recognized as that, contraceptives for women, particularly injectable contraceptives, have been condemned throughout the world. They have had a very poor response. So some big organizations came and wanted us to do some research on that. So we had to decline that. Another aspect is also that when building infrastructure and it affects a particular population, that infrastructure, organizations that come to us to do a social monitoring or an investigation into social issues there, like what kind of incentives would be good enough to make the population agree to that. So these are some things that we had declined because we are not very sure, what that finally will lead to. So it becomes, so therefore there is a lot of discussion between us. But one thing is that we recognize each other's, we respect each other's views, and we don't take any decisions even if one of us don't agree. So that's fine. That means that a project gone, but that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
We might have to lower the number of people to 3 then going forward.
Yeah, yeah.
So this recently, the government is, doing a lot of digitalization, this GEM portal and all, where you can go and get bid for the project. Do you think those some things are all helping companies like yours, maybe others also?
See, we are not
GEM portal,
working.
yeah.
We are not working so much on government portals, but we feel that technology is very, very important, and it has to be delivered, adapted to the situation in most of the geographical areas in India. So it has to go out of the cities. So like getting a Aadhaar card or a ration card or any government comes with a huge number of subsidies and handouts. Like for example, there is a direct cash transfer to tribal children. If they go to school, they will get that much money, which will go into their parents' account. And for adolescent girls who cross 8th standard, there is some kind of a marriage allowance. That is, it is to prevent parents from stopping them from going to school. What they say is that if there's proof the girl has completed 11th standard, then the parents will get some money so that they can use it for the marriage. So these are, there are portals for this, but there's a lot of problems. The poor cannot access it. They don't know. There is some middleman in the village sitting and he gets the money. So even though they say direct transfer to the bank, DTB, the bank guys corner it, because they are the guys who have to withdraw the money, and even the passbook people cannot read. So these are some things that we communicate on and help people to understand that these are all the schemes and this is where they can get information as well as what kind of money they can get. There are a lot of housing programs. Now, what normally happens is that the government announces programs, puts some kind of target in the budget, but that never gets spent. And that is the whole idea. You announce a big budget, but some money will remain unspent, and there will be a lot of leakage. So one way is to communicate about these things to the rural population, though we ourselves cannot do anything about that leakage because it is an entire political system. They control who should get the subsidies and all that. But we can help. We can help in making that kind of mobile apps or accessible kiosks where people will know a little bit better. People who cannot read. Like there are these IVRS services, interactive voice response systems, where a person dials a number and they will get a message saying that, you are in vaccination is due today for your baby. The second vaccination is due on this date, and or your ration card, you will get these things for this month. So we use the IVRS technology. We use low-end mobile, low-resource kind of apps to convey all this information to the rural population.
I have a question. So I have a couple of them, but first of all, great work with what you're doing. This is a very, the space I really enjoy or want to learn more about is this from a social entrepreneurship. A couple of questions. So because you're involved, I've always been wondering, how do I get to the last mile of being able to help people, right? So what is the biggest problem? Is it access to finance, or is it access to knowledge? Do you think is the biggest thing that's keeping our rural population from, standard improving? Because a lot of people immediately jump to finance, but to your point, there is some inherent access issues. They don't know how to have a bank account. They don't know how to access it. So to me, the question is, if I had to provide something, right, would it be access to knowledge, even in the ways you're talking about the IVRS system, or is it funding that they really need that to help them? So I'll stop there. Give me your perspective on that, please.
Yeah, that's a very important question. Money cannot solve all problems, and there is a lot of ignorance in the rural population, a lot of stigma related behavior, and many other beliefs which impede them from accessing or going out and trying to find out what can benefit them. Like even if there is a free program like Kala Azar, you get a injection free, but many people don't want to avail that. So because of, you cannot blame them, they are in that kind of situation. Like women, for example, if you have to go to the district hospital to get an injection, that means that you lose 2 days of your work, and you have a baby to take care of. So the husband is not willing to take you there. So these are some issues that happen. So behavioral change is very, very important in this context. And education. Education is not just, entering a school, but real education in the sense that trying to know what's happening, be aware of programs, be aware of your rights firstly. So that is very important thing, that you have a right to live, you have a right to certain minimal things, you have a right to water, for example, or healthcare. And there are of course uh, the local the peripheral health system they call, which reaches the last mile. So there is a public health center supposed to cater to 5,000 population. But now, because of over a period of time, the rule has remained the same, but the population has increased. So now one public health center even sometimes caters to 10,000 people. And often medicines are not there. But if you educate the people that public health center means that it should have a gynecologist, it should have so many medicines, it should have some pharmacist. If these things the rural population get to know, then they can demand that, within the constraints. So education, communication, and removing these barriers to understanding what is there, destigmatizing certain issues are all very important. And therefore, a communication is a big component in our thing. We try to communicate usually visually and not a non-textual manner. All these posters that the government puts up in the villages, nobody can even read them.
I do have a last question is, I'm looking at from investment perspective, right? I completely agree with you. NGOs or a nonprofit is not the way to go. Personally, I think a for-profit enterprise can make more of an impact than a nonprofit from my perspective. To keep under that context, what I'm thinking about is, as far as are there opportunities to invest in, we want to do investment to help people too, right? So whether it's education, whether helping, I know the government has some programs you just talked through, but is there an opportunity to invest in entrepreneurs in these communities for profit, where they also improve the standard of living and we can do this? And is it possible for people outside of India to do this? So can you help me with a little more context? And again, if there's something we can take offline, I can connect if you have time to.
Sure. Yeah, I can certainly help in that. There are a lot of players, and now over a period of time, the funding, there has been a change. Now, earlier India used to depend a lot on World Bank funding and so on. Now, the corporate social responsibility law has come. Now they are trying to liquidate that law, because they are supposed to spend 2% of their profits of companies who have a turnover of more than 100 crore or a profit of 100 crore. I don't remember. So, but now they are trying to sort of wriggle out of that. And even in CSR, corporate social responsibility situations, the company usually channels it to their own people, their own consultants, or they have a back end NGO or a non-profit. So there is some tightening going on there, and the CSRs are emerging as big players. So one is that you can contact the CSRs. We work with HCL Foundation, and you used to work with IBM Foundation, not now, and also we work with the ITC Foundation. So there are these foundations who fairly put in money and do some good work in education and health. There are consortiums which also work, like the London School of Tropical Diseases, and there are Drugs Without Borders in France. So there are some organizations like that who work in specific areas in India or in South Asia. So certainly there is a huge need and also opportunities. And if there's an innovative way to approach that, then it is both you can maximize on social benefits as well as um, some decent margin on the kind of work that you're doing.
Okay, so it's 8:40 now. We'll stop here.
Yeah.
And if there are any other questions, we can share your email or phone number, like, the participant can reach out to you. Okay, sir. So I will do that.
Sure.
And maybe we'll take few minutes to introduce new people who joined the meeting so that we can, and if you have any particular requirement that like AEC can help, that also we could do that. And I think we have Akshaya, I think Akshaya, you are joining first time this meeting, or you already joined before?
No. This is the first time I'm joining the meeting. And hi to all. And I think I'm the most youngest in this meeting. And I'm glad to be the part of this meeting also. And as I discussed with sir earlier, I am still a working professional and not set to start any business, but planning to do so. And for that, I need to get to hear up from experienced person's talk. So that's why I want to get benefited from this meeting. So I'm glad I will be continuing this meeting hereafter.
Perfect. What batch are you, Akshaya?
I'm from 2019, sir.
Welcome.
Yeah, definitely.
2019.
I know that's what we are trying to.
Yes.
That's awesome. Welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, welcome, Akshaya. Is there a new
Thank you so
joiners?
much.
Okay, so I could see Mr. Jason, Mr. Kannan, or Mr. Subramanian, and then Mr. Ashok Anandan. If any of you wants to briefly introduce you, and we'll be happy to listen to you.
Hi, sir. I'm Jason. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I have completed my BTech and MTech in AC Tech from 2017 and 2019 batches.
Okay.
And I would like to continue in the entrepreneurship cell meeting. And I'm planning to start a enterprise in waste management. So I found this one will be useful for me.
Okay, good.
Sure. Waste management is a good area, and we have done some work. And again, there are very good initiatives in India on waste management. And
thank you so much, sir. And I'll be joining and continuing in the coming months.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Jason. So anyone? So Mr. Subramaniam, you.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm Sundareshwaran. Subramaniam is my son's name. I mean, I'm using his login. See, I'm Sundareshwaran. I'm 81 batch chemical engineer. So I just I had some time, so I'm attending. No particular purpose. Just wanted to know what's happening. I'm a retired professional, so I just wanted to know what's happening. That's it. No particular purpose. Anything useful is being exchanged. I would like to just listen and understand, and maybe if some worthwhile ideas come up, maybe take up. Not sure. Thanks.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for participating. And some of the things it's not like you can also offer us your knowledge, right? Because now you said you retired, that means that it's a wealth of knowledge, experience that you have, and we would definitely love to get all that information.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I'm open. If you think my expertise would be of use, that will be a pleasure to share it. I mean, I don't know what is required, so I can't comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Other one, I think I could see Mr. Sodhi Selvam, sir. Ilangon, sir, nice to see you in Google. You
Good
could
evening.
introduce yourself, please.
Good evening, Ramesh and other colleagues. It's nice to be in touch with the ACTech friends. I too belong to 1981 batch like Mr. Sundareswaran. I also retired recently after serving in a few organizations. I am currently associated with the Atul Innovation Mission, more as a mentor for some startups and also for tinkering labs, mostly on pro bono basis. This is the first time I'm attending this meeting. Nice to be in touch with all you people. So if I'm of any use to any one of you, definitely my services are available. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Now, that's the, Akshay, that's the advantage. I met Mr. Sodhi Selvam only once in a conference, that too just a few minutes, right? Then after that, I took the liberty to, even though he was an MD of one of the large public sector enterprises, I used to call him, I tell him that I am an ACTech alumni, he just to listen to me. And I mean, that's so nice of, the bond is always there, an ACTech alumni. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So can we have Mr. Raghavan's number?
Yeah, I will message his number. Sir, could you type your number, or because recently he just lost his phone, just today, I believe, but we can still message that number, right? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Ramesh, Ilango has been putting up his hand. I just a very brief interaction. Ilango is my batchmate, 76, or maybe most of you know that. We tried to collaborate on a e-training module, because that was both our first experience, I think, on putting a module on the internet, a self-training module for the ordinary health worker. So it had a lot of challenges. It had to be visual with some voiceover and things like that. And it had to work in a setting, even on a mobile. So it required a lot of, experimentation. And that led to a lot more investigation on our side. And e-training is one of the emerging areas in social development, most required now, because there's not enough trainers now, and therefore putting it on the internet, self-paced training, people can come in and leave anytime, is a must, and huge amount of training materials are available. Some solutions, cheap solutions or open source solutions, will be very welcome in e-training. Ilango, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Raghavan. Thank you, first of all. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you for coming in the very short notice. And Raghavan has been, I've been in touch with Raghavan even after the call, at least I use his lectures. He are in all the debates and all the college competition. So yeah, I really worked, enjoyed working with him in different solutions, like a social areas. It was quite a new areas for us, but we really enjoyed some of the areas where we could provide a very small help in providing some kind of IT help and all those things in e-learning or mobile solutions and all those things. But coming back to our alumni association as it is, so I would like to thank Ramesh, who has been keeping this, Ramesh and his friends keeping this flag going. But this is a small initiative, but we have a long plans. So in December 2021, we are planning for a very big one-day event for entrepreneurial event, which is going to be a statewide or nationwide hackathon related to all the disciplines related to ICTech. So we would like to have some kind of students plus alumni put together. We would like to develop some kind of competitions and then exhibitions and all those things of all the development. So what we are doing now is a monthly event, is a build up towards that. So that is one of the things I would like to keep stressing in every meeting. And the second thing, I would like to come back to you, Raghavan, for we need some kind of help in actually alumni association as it is. See, alumni association was formed a few years back, about 1 or 2 years back. It's quite young, but we have taken a very ambitious goal of making AC Tech a center of excellence. I mean, like what it was in 1940s and 50s and 60s. But what I understand from the seniors, they are very proud about AC Tech for its very, very deep research. The basic research they have done, and which made a lot of impact on the industry and also for the country, for the and also for the environment, all these things. So we would like to bring back that kind of impact back into this. It's a long dream. It's not, we are not looking for a short-term solution. We need your help in guiding us and in what they can bring so within the AC Tech to bring back that kind of research culture, and then not the research in the sense of for the research, but for the socially relevant, nationally relevant, environmentally relevant, and people relevant. Those kind of research, and how do we identify them? How do we propagate this within the college itself, so that we motivate more and more faculties and students and PhD students, so that focus on the areas and research which is really relevant for India today. I mean, our areas are all, we have about 10, 11 faculties today.
Yeah.
Each area is unique. Very few could have these faculties. And our, like chemicals everywhere, pharmacy or food or petroleum, all of them are day-to-day life related areas. Safety engineering, we have a very master's program in this. All of them are related to people very much. So we would like to bring this back into the real research, focused research, back into the prime place of within AC Tech. This is one of the major objectives where I am working with our leading industrialists. We are trying to form a big trust to mobilize funds, everything else. But that is only one part of the problem. The main problem we face is which area to identify, how we can bring about a cultural change within the AC Tech, with the faculties, HODs, faculties, and the students down. So how we can do that? We need your help in guiding how we can do this in the long run. We are looking for something like a 5-year, 10-year tenure. So we would like to bring back this kind of story of AC Tech into the research or institute like IISc or IIT Madras, which is, I mean, it requires a lot of work, but as an association, we would like to set up those kind of support structure, whether it requires some kind of chairs from overseas or from specialists from outside or from industries to bring them here. And we would like to fund them, those kind of activities to bring back this kind of things. So we need your advice on what way we can go about, because we are still, we have only vision, we don't have the path. So
thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. And I'm fully for it. And whatever little bit I can contribute, definitely I'm willing to contribute. It is a very tall call, what you're saying, and it requires many minds, many experienced minds. I'm definitely willing to be a part of a small bit in the whole plan. Definitely, whatever way I can assist, I'm with you.
Especially in the area of evaluating whatever you're doing, we want some checks and balances.
Yeah.
What you're doing, is it really useful or not?
Yeah.
We need somebody to tell us, hey, this is not giving you results. Okay, change your track, whatever it is. The 10 years, we want you to be a partner in this kind of goal. You are very good in evaluating the process independently. Those kind of areas we require. Okay.
Sure.
Okay, sir. So is anyone, Mr. Kannan, do you want to introduce yourself? If you're available, yeah.
Your voice is.
Yeah, we could not hear
You're
you.
not able. You're not able to hear.
No, we can't hear you.
I
No,
think,
actually, you're not mute. Maybe your mic is not, yeah. You're not in mute, but your mic is not working, I believe.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, yeah, we could hear you now.
Okay. I think something wrong with the SIM card. Okay. I am actually a 1980 batch guy. After that I did MTech in IIT Madras. Then I worked in production. Then I moved to Mumbai, and I was in a consultancy firm called Toyo Engineering. Then I went abroad. I've been in the consultancy, process consultancy. Now I'm not doing anything after late. I just joined because I would like to activate, but unfortunately I'm in Mumbai. If I'm in Chennai, I would have been all the time. I would love to be in AC Tech only to do whatever a little bit I can do. But unfortunately I'm away from Mumbai, Chennai. So I saw this, I thought, okay, I'll just get to know, because my son is also a chemical engineer. He did chemical engineering from University Mumbai and then did PhD in Texas A&M US. So he is now just started working a couple of years. He's always been looking for entrepreneurship. So I was just wondering, why not I join and then try to see how best I can help him, because whatever line he's going to take, I can take some tips or experience of all the gentlemen who are going to be there. So that is the intention. I thought, okay, let me try that. That's the intention of it. So last time also I was there very much. This is what is my intention. Maybe I'll start along with him something, hopefully. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Ramesh, I have to drop off.
Yes,
So
okay.
have some other work coming in. But Mr. Raghavan, thanks for the time and your sharing your experience. Just like Rajni said, I also have a bunch of other questions and some thoughts I would like to discuss with you. And thanks for sharing your number. So we won't take too much of your time. I won't take too much of your time, but I'll ping you and identify when you're available. So perhaps give you a call through WhatsApp or something and bounce some ideas with you. Okay.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot, sir.
It's the second number, okay? Not the first one. I typed 181.
Yes, I saw that. That's like that's a number to Mars. It's two additional
even that is wrong.
digits in it. So yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Is it 86610? Is it?
Yeah, 981-818-6610.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. And Ramesh, thanks for setting this up, and we'll connect. I have some like the thing that I was discussing with you. We'll do that. All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you all.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we'll also, there's maybe a couple of minutes. Is there any other final comments before we end the session? Anyone?
I want to thank Mr. Raghavan. Also, sorry, if there are any topics that you guys want us to cover or some industries of interest, please let us know. We have a big network of entrepreneurs as well as other non-AC Tech folks we can bring on to a panel. But we are bringing based on who's available. But if there's a specific thought process, at least we can take that to the smaller group and discuss. So just let us know.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Rajni.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Raghavan, for taking time to join this session. Wonderful.
I would tell something.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Ramesh, I would like to tell something. See, my name is N. Ramesh from 1973 batch. And I've been conducting a lot of programs in other organizations in motivation and particularly on the health aspects, how we can live without medicines. My objective is that the intake of medicine should be brought down to be a healthier person. So I have developed few things. I have done one research and I have practiced few things, which also even our entrepreneurs also, if you given an opportunity. Are you able to hear me fully?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We will do that. We will arrange one session for you.
Sure. I'm here to help you, sir. I will help you to share my experiences so that whatever is adaptable, one can adopt it.
Okay.
And my background is I have worked in all the sectors of the industry, all managements, cooperative sector, private sector, government sector, semi-government sector, and all these private managements also, public limited companies also, in textiles mainly. And only 5 years I was in the supervision level, and within 10 years I have become the general manager, managing about 1,400 workers. And I have been the very successful manager, giving the results oriented general manager, giving result based profits.
Sure, sir.
Okay.
Nice to hear your story. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for taking time to join the session. Thank you, Mr. Raghavan, sir. We are pleased to have you today. And as Mr. Ilangovan pointed out, it'll be nice if you're going to help the AC Tech as well. And look forward to seeing you all. Our next meeting will be on April. It's going to be 3rd April. Just before the elections, I believe. So hopefully we will have a topic on. Not sure, but okay. See you all. Yeah.
No political talks.
No political talks. Yeah. Okay. See you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramesh.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you, Raghavan.
Bye.